48-hour art check, round 64.
All right.
Here we are. And
Trusty
you are back.
explosion. Yeah.
You are back.
And I am back. I am
Yes.
like hardcore back. Yeah.
Yeah. And I sorry, go ahead.
So for those of you who like maybe you're just tuning in for the first time, this is our like channel where we do every other day check-in to make sure we're working on our personal projects. And I'm going to say this up top. I have failed my art check this week, but it's because I just got back from Adobe Max, and it's the first time I've gone to a design conference. And the first design conference I picked, I think, is like the biggest design conference in the world, and I think they had like over like 18,000 people there. It was insane,
Right.
and it's just like if you've never been, it is just like overload of awesome information. There's a kind of convention style floor where every product you use as a designer is there.
And you get to when I went, you get to like go talk to Wacom and tell them like, dude, you screwed this up. I like this, and they listen to you. It's pretty dope. Yeah.
No, it was great. I mean, Suitcase Fusion, we use that at my workplace, and there's a bug that annoys the hell out of me with it, with the new Adobe, and it's just not super compatible. And I was like, what's going on with that? And they talked me through it a little bit. And I was like, okay, I feel a little better about this. It's a great experience. You know, if there's French paper just giving out cool samples, which for designers is like, it's like candy, a kid in a candy store. Like you get all these free samples of just cool swag that's all well designed, and you're surrounded by a bunch of people who like are great, nice people, and none of them are socially on point because they all spend time at a computer every day. So it's like, you know, it literally is like the best experience for a graphic designer and illustrator. It's a little hefty on the cost, but I think if you're working as a professional, you know, definitely convince your boss, or convince, like if you're a teacher, convince your school to front the cost, because right now, the day after, my brain is just on overload. Like I got so much content and information from it that I just feel like I'm overflowing with inspiration and kind of fire to like continue and make better art, make my team better professionally, and like even more so, like I feel like a little bit of reignited kind of like early energy as a designer, and I guess maybe we can get into that, but
so let's call this the topic.
Oh, for sure. Sorry.
And
no, we're starting now with the topic, and Scott filled in last time I watched it. It was great. You guys should watch the last art check. It's great. Scott was like super honest, and I loved it. And I even told him in messaging, like, you can join us anytime. So I mean, we'd have to figure out the logistics to make that happen, but
just scoot over. Make room.
We'll just scoot. But yeah, he's just a great guy, and like you guys should check that out. So so Adobe Max, like, I don't know, I kind of want to, I guess I don't want to hog most of the the conversation though, because you've been to Adobe Max before, and you gave me a few tips before going in, and some of them rung really true.
Right. So here's my, I've now been, because of where I work, they give me what they call personal development leave. So they pay a certain amount of money every year for me to stay relevant and stay active in my field, right? Which is what everybody should be doing, whether you're in education or industry or whatever.
For sure.
Employers, if you have employees, you should pay for them to do conferences and get-togethers and things, because it's good. And so I've been to a few of these in the last couple of years, and I went to Max twice. I went to a few other things before that. And I just got back from VidSummit, and I've noticed something significant that I think is probably the best piece of advice that I could give. everyone is really good. Like the convention organizers are always really good. The conference organizers are always really good at writing the descriptions for people. And so, like, they all sound awesome. Like, every workshop sounds super cool, right? They all sound like, oh, this is amazing. I'm super excited. I would say half of the ones there, I don't want to say that they're garbage, but I do want to say that there are different skill levels that they're presenting to. So for Adobe Max, you've got people like me and Josh who are going, full-time industry professionals. You also have like tech high schools and stuff like that, where the teachers are like, I need to learn Photoshop because my students want to learn Photoshop, and so they're coming to Max for a different reason than I'm going to Max. And so I don't want to say that those workshops that are intended for the beginners or the intermediates are bad. They're just not the right audience, and it's hard to tell the difference because I feel like the scale they give isn't super interesting. So there's two things I look for. One is, I'll say this on the air. It's fine. Almost always when it's an employee of Adobe, it's going to be at least less exciting and less engaging and way more technical and a little bit pitchy. And then everybody else is going to fall into two camps. And the way to test out who they are is you check out their credentials. So go look at their work and the things that they've done, and that'll be a great sifter between who's going to give a really engaging and good presentation and who's going to, like, you press V to get the black arrow tool. You press A to get the white arrow tool, and things like that. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the one thing I'll say that people might have a false conception of, like, it's also not a really great networking convention because there's 18,000 people. So it's any opportunity where you're meeting other creatives is a good networking opportunity. But the kind of networking you have to do at Adobe Max is going to be very, like, intrusive and just shameless. and honestly, if you're starting out, you kind of have to do that. So
except for lunch.
Yeah.
I feel like lunch, you just sit down at tables.
Yeah.
And you sit with whomever, and then it's a good opportunity. But everything else, it's like workshop, and everybody's going. So it's weird. It's weird to, like, be like, hi, business card.
Although what I would give for advice for people who are going there specifically for networking, just remember these are all socially awkward people, and most people are going there with a desire to connect to other people who do what they do. So, like, actually a lot of the time, like, you're not going to lose by just being straightforward and being like, hi, how's it going? Right. I even did a test, like, well, we'll get into this a little bit, but, like, I actually just kind of decided to perform just some social experiments because I was like, these are just such great people. Like, designers are a really rare breed of people.
Yeah.
And so I just randomly started being like, high five to people. And, like, literally I had like 90 people give me high fives, and there was one person who was like, nah. So I got, like, that's good odds.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I was doing that as an example to a friend of mine who I was there with, as, like, these are good people. Like, I can prove it. Like, they're just really nice, like, friendly people. It's crazy. So anyhow, so to me, like, the thing I didn't get out of it was come out with, like, a bunch of new shortcuts or skills, like technical skills in the programs for Adobe.
Yeah.
What I did get was a snapshot of some really cool things. Like, the first day, the keynote was super exciting, and one of the coolest things that came out of it for people who are, like, using these programs is, like, and I just remembered the second Photoshop thing. Before we were recording, I had forgotten it, but I just remembered it. So they announced two really cool things with Photoshop that they should have changed like 10 years ago, and they're changing. And, like, literally that moment got more applause than any celebrity who showed up that night. They said you can now edit text by double clicking. You no longer have to go to the text tool to select your text. And that just led to, like, this raucous applause. Right. And then they were like, and when you need to go back, you no longer have to hit Alt. You just go Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, which you've always done on Illustrator. And it's always been really irritating switching between the two, because even though I have those things programmed like clockwork, it's like I'll have these moments on Illustrator where I'm like, Control Alt Z, why isn't it going back? Or moments on Photoshop where I'm like, Control Z, why does it keep switching forward?
And
it still happens to me.
Control
Yeah.
Alt Z in Illustrator is dangerous.
Yeah.
Because Control Alt Z will bring up a menu that asks you if you would like to revert back to the last time that you saved the document.
Which is a nightmare, and it's happened to me, and I've actually accidentally just skipped it and done that. So
right, and then you're like,
yeah, it's a beautiful fix. It's a huge fix and like a hugely big deal. So that was cool. And then
I like the way they started that segment, because
yeah,
that has been a huge frustration of mine, and I wonder how many people I've talked to, because when I went to Max last year, I found some of the engineers of some of the programs that I use who are there. They're like the program engineers, and I was like, hey, let me bend your ear for a minute. And I told them, like, here are some things that are terrible, you know? And the interesting thing is, they got updated like a couple weeks later. Some of those things got fixed, and I was like, I wonder if that was me or if like 15 other people said that or whatever. But like the thing that I always told everybody who works on Photoshop is, I said, listen, you guys completely ignore the fact that there is a huge segment of your user base that are illustrators. You focus on photographers, you focus on photo manipulation, you focus on matte painting, you focus on all of this stuff, and ignore the fact that there are illustrators that use your program. And then last year they hired Kyle Webster. And I was like, oh, so they might... And for those of you that don't know, Kyle used to have this brush set that is the most amazing brush set. And they hired him or bought his brush set out, or I don't know exactly. But this year, he was an employee of Adobe. Last year, they were like, we're partnering with Kyle Webster. And so I don't know what's happened in the last year. But anyway, I was like, oh, this is started something good. And then this year, when they made the announcements that you were just talking about, what they said was, a number of you use this for illustration and may feel like we've been ignoring you. And I was like, yes, amen. Yeah. And then they were like, so it does this now, and it does this now, and it does this now. And the guy literally said, and it should have been doing this forever. You know, like, we're way behind.
And it is hilarious because, like I said, they announced a lot of celebrities after that. And, like, literally, like, even one of the celebrities was like, what, a Photoshop brush gets more applause than I do? Like, which is, yes, this is that audience. So then, like, so what I'm going to touch on aren't going to be the workshops, because I didn't find them useful. Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I just didn't get a lot out of them.
Sure.
They were fun, but I just didn't get a lot out of them. So I don't really feel like they're worth touching on. Like, I want to build up the stuff that was positive. You
should have gone to the animation ones.
Yeah, I probably should have.
Because I should have told you that. Right before I did my 100 days of animation, I did Adobe Max. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to every animation thing there is. And so I went to Titmouse did one. That they do a bunch of stuff for Adult Swim. Nickelodeon did one. And there were several of those. And they all use Adobe products to animate their cartoons.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Those were amazing workshops. Anyway,
see, that does sound amazing. The first one I did go to was like the lead, and I'm gonna have to look at his name because I'm terrible with names. But let's see. So it was the Future of Experience Design with Albert Shum, who's like the head UX designer for Microsoft, and it's one of those workshops where, because he's a representative of Microsoft, it was a little preachy for Microsoft. However, that was one of those ones where I was literally like, I felt like I was falling asleep during it. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It just wasn't excitingly presented.
Right.
But the content presented within it, so there's a few little nuggets. I'll share some of them, but I encourage you guys to like look these up. I'm going to be posting a video of my experience at the thing, because I don't like biting entire workshops. I just got tiny little snippets of people talking. I don't feel right like recording a whole 30-minute session and posting it online, because I figure that's their content. Yeah. But I'll give some snippets that were really inspiring from this that kind of stuck with me after. And so it was one of those things where I probably, like, stepping out of it, if somebody was like, should I go to this? I'd be like, no. And in retrospect, I'm like, no, there was a lot of good content in there. So he, like, the most impactful thing he did was, and this really hit home for me because I constantly struggle with this working in corporate, where you feel like you have constraints and you can't kind of push the bar. And he showed it's a really simple diagram, but it was just a grid of boxes. And he was like, this by all means is a good design. You know, it's symmetrical, it's well placed, it's like evenly done. And this is what, you know, a lot of people, especially in corporate, are going to conceive of as design. And then he takes that, and because he's a UX designer, you know, he makes one of the squares or the rectangles become a blue dot, and he's like, this is you, like you need to be the blue dot, and he puts it on the grid. And then the blue dot's animated, so it starts like hitting all the boxes, and the boxes start shaking and kind of moving, and he's like, now you've got design, you know. And then he proceeded to show all these examples of like humanitarian things that Microsoft has done, like videos of like these great, like, you know, really like beneficial things, like reaching out to people who are deaf, or like making a game controller for people who are disabled, you know, stuff that isn't like profit driven.
Right.
And this was what really stuck with me was, and he was also talking about advocating for good design in the same way, but he was also saying like none of that happened from the top down. That all happened from somebody being the blue dot, advocating for it, you know, getting, you know, called out, having to go through hell, like to kind of get this thing through. And then the corporate did it. And that's how that happens. Like you're not going to work for a company that's randomly like, we should make a game controller for disabled people. You know, a lot of the time you're going to be working for a company that makes game controllers, and you're going to say, we need one. It has to happen. And you'll get grief and you fight for it. And then the company gets credit for doing a good thing, which they should. Right. But it's like, it was really encouraging to me because it kind of reignited the fact that I do have to kind of stick in there to try to kind of change things from being boxes to having a little more dynamic movement in it, and more like changing it up, because you can go with like milk toast design, but that doesn't go anywhere for your company either. So it's like it literally for the good of your company as a designer, or especially on your own stuff, like you really do have to kind of get out of that safe area. And I got a lot out of that. So I thought that was really inspiring. And just that little snippet really stuck with me. So that's what I got out of that. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that I don't trust groups of people. I trust individuals. And I think you get too many people together, it becomes a problem in almost every situation. But one-on-one, we're fine. We're a lot better. Most people one-on-one are good people, right? And so if you get a company or a political party or a religion or whatever that loses sight in the voice of the individual, it always becomes a problem. Right? And so I think that's true in companies. And so it is important to be an individual and to fight for the ideas that you have. And as a company, it's important, and managers, to listen to the one, because I think the one is always better than the 99. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a big grassroots thing. But I remember hearing, who was it that said this? Now I can't remember. But it was something, and I'll think of it in a minute. But they were saying that groups of people never accomplish anything. It's one person that changes the world. It's these outliers. It's these weirdos. It's these creatives. It's these rabble rousers. That come out, and they're the ones that end slavery and do amazing, incredible things, because they're willing to say, this group of people could change, and I am going to like front that idea.
Yeah, and I thought that one of the things that really stuck with me too, this is like what you're saying ties into some of the other stuff that stuck with me out of his talk, which was like one of the things he was saying was like, that is the future of UX design, is that it needs to be individual. And he was actually saying there's too much. Like there's too much content and people are too focused on making the new app and the new thing.
Right.
And they're not thinking enough about making changes within the systems that exist.
Yeah.
And I know some of that's probably a soft sell for people continuing to buy Microsoft, but at the same time, it's true. I mean, it was really interesting because he was basically saying like, don't rely on making standard generic design because that's all, like the future of that is automated. Like,
Right.
and the one thing that's not going to be automated is the individual inserting themselves and making dynamic changes or doing the unexpected. And I think that's a huge, like that was just a hugely inspiring thing. So then I get out of this workshop. This is how Adobe Max works. It's like you watch this giant thing, there's a million screens. A lot of it's a giant commercial for Adobe, which you know, we all paid to be there because we love Adobe. Like, even though none of us like the subscription plan, it's like they're the best. And oh, that's another huge thing they announced was that they're for the iPad, like next year, they're going to be releasing Photoshop, which
full version of Photoshop.
Yeah, full. Like you can save PSDs and open PSDs and edit between. Like that's a huge step, and that's another one of those like, okay, come on, like that needs to happen.
Because because they used to do and still do have Illustrator Draw, which is basically 2 Illustrator tools. It's not the full program. It has the blob brush tool, which is useful in specific certain situations, but generally is kind of crap, and the eraser tool so that you can erase the parts of the blob brush tool that you messed up. And so everybody's like, oh, look, I'm illustrating in vector. And it's like, yeah, but if you look at that file, it's going to look like shiz because you've got 40 billion anchor points. And so I have always hated Adobe's mobile attempts because they've been pushing them so hard. But I'll tell you what, they're going to give Wacom a run for their money now because the iPad Pro is significantly better than a ton of the Wacom products as far as Cintiqs and stuff like that, including in price, because you can get a pretty big, like 13.9 inch. I think that's the size. It's big. It's the one I have. iPad for like $1,000, and the equivalent Cintiq is like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, depending on like what size and features you get. But with this, you could literally do all of your illustration and coloring on your iPad Pro, and at any point in time, switch seamlessly back and forth between your desktop, laptop, whatever else you have your Adobe subscription tied to. That's a huge deal.
Well, it's massive, and the thing is, I don't know if people realize the extent that that's sweeping the industry, because like I would say in the NCS, like I don't have an iPad Pro. I like when I'm working on cartooning, I work traditionally,
right?
But which, by the way, doesn't mean I wouldn't want an iPad Pro. I just like I wouldn't utilize it enough.
Dear Apple, you can sponsor this podcast, this vlog.
Hey, give me an iPad Pro. I have no problem with that. I will use it and I will endorse it because I'm sure it's cool. I've seen it like multiple times because about 80% of the NCS switched to iPad Pros. Like they're that intuitive that a bunch of people who do cartooning for a living were like, this is better. And so you know, I think any integration they make with that's a huge step. So that, like, keep in mind, like, we've had a long conversation already and we haven't even gotten through the first day. That's how overwhelming and insane this thing is, you know? So from there, you know, we go to lunch. There's like free food everywhere. There's free booze, and I like to drink occasionally, so that's fun. I also get the sales thinking behind that, right? Because if you have a client, it's good to wine and dine them. You know, like somebody's a little more relaxed, they're going to be way easier to sell to.
And they wine and dine like 10,000 people at once.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and it like I said, it's a good group of people, which is what I like, because a lot of the time, if you end up in a situation like that and it's not a bunch of designers, you could have like craziness. But it's like the securities like really didn't seem too crazy, at least in the event. We'll get into some of the crazy security later on, but but like because everyone's relaxed and nice and friendly because they're all designers, you know.
Right.
Not to be snobby, but it's like when you get creatives in a room, they're collaborative people. Like these
Right.
aren't like. But anyhow, so then I got to see Jessica Hish, and it was hilarious because I kind of made a joke to my friend because we get there and there's this massive line like wrapping around all the other like booths because it's set up kind of like Area 51 where there's these like giant tents like separating the different things, which is funny. That'll tie into Aaron Draplin's thing later on. He likes to mess with that system. But but yeah, so Jessica Hish, who's one of my like all-time favorite designers, she's literally one of the best letters alive right now. And if you guys aren't familiar, like if you guys like typography and stuff, check out Jessica Hish. Like it's inspiration and she's on point with trends. She does these breakdowns of logo redesign. She gets paid absurd amounts of money to do, and there's a reason for it because it's like she'll do these little technical things to make a logo more coherent. Um, so anyhow, so her talk was just amazing, and most of it was very personal and talking about her own biography and how her work-life balance changed from having a kid and also from changing location. And so the gist of it was that like New York is like this hard, crazy creative town where people work and then they get off work to work. And when you meet people, you don't talk about who you are. You don't talk about like who you know. You talk about what are you doing. And that's it. That's like people's identity.
Right.
And so she was saying when she started, it was like work-life balance. There was no space. And then when she moved to California, she put a space, you know, because in California, there's a little bit of a different culture. Like people do work really hard, but when we're off work, we're off work. You know, there's a big separation. And then she talked about when she had a kid, like how that life part got huge. And she did that all with type, which was cute and clever. But anyhow, brilliant talk, like super inspiring. Her point at the end, and I did catch this, so it's on my YouTube. but one of the things that really stuck with me was she was first off like pushing for more men to be open about their fatherhood, like in design settings, because you're not just your career. Right. And she was also pushing for more women to not just be like all about motherhood, to also post their work when they're a mom, because it's like it's not like your life stops when you have a kid, you know. And but the end point that really stuck with me and got me really motivated was she was basically saying cheers to people who don't think it's a rational thing to work 80 hours a week. and it actually stuck with me because I tend to be on that spectrum of like I work, like I love working. And so, but it did kind of hit home that like the quality of your work and kind of the more targeted nature, like trying to design your work life where it has a better work-life balance is not a bad thing to examine. Right. Because there's different value, you know, and that's coming from somebody who like they have the best clients, you know. There's no better clients than what these people are getting, you know.
And so I've heard that said, be a human being, not a human doing. Yeah. And there is this really interesting culture right now where we are worshiping busy. And this idea of, and I've actually had some experiences in the last couple of days with students who are like super excited to like pull all-nighters and they like get really excited about it. And I'm like, guys, you haven't done anything for 2 weeks on this project. This all-nighter is not a good thing. This all-nighter is a failure. It's a failure of your ability to work at a normal pace that's reasonable and sustainable. Like you can't do that. And there was, I think, an announcement. Who's making Red Dead Redemption? Is it? I can't remember. Rockstar?
I think it is Rockstar Games. Yeah.
Yeah. So Red Dead Redemption, the company, I believe it's Rockstar. They announced they're like, yeah, our developers are doing like 90-hour weeks to get ready for the whatever, and they did it as a way to promote the game, and it actually spurred some really interesting conversations on Twitter about this, and there's been some studies done where people are in that industry for like 5 to 10 years and then they bail hard.
Yeah.
And like most of the people I know that have worked in video games, this one guy that teaches with me, he says, yeah, I loved video games until I worked at video games, and now when I see or hear anything that reminds me of video games, I have PTSD. And he's like, and I'm not exaggerating. Like I literally get anxiety when I hear video game music, or like I can't even enjoy them anymore. And that is a culture that is happening in a lot of creative spaces, that is massively unhealthy.
Agreed.
Massively unhealthy.
Like that's the thing. Like there's overtime where I work, but it's not 20 hours of overtime. Like it's like the movie and film industry, which a lot of my friends work in, it will burn you out. Like there is no way, no if and or but about it. Like it will. And so like I even have a friend who's kind of starting to do more and more freelance and getting really into the idea of being on board. But he was really straightforward with me and was like, if I'm going to do this, I have to do it before I'm 40, because I will, like, I'm not, like, that's my cap. And that's true. I mean, it's kind of true, because it's like you have a window of time where you can work at that level, and you'll build up a lot of laurels, and you'll get some great connections and some great stuff under your belt, but you're going to pay for it in your health and sanity.
Yeah.
And that's the nature of the beast. I mean, that is animation. It's not as bad as it was back when the 9 old men, were working at Disney, but it's still pretty tough, and it's designed that way. And some of it's out of necessity, and a lot of it's out of, just kind of a failure to think it can change,
Right. And there's also a cultural expectation that is different than the requirement, because there are people that will start at these jobs, and then they will think that that's the expectation when no one has actually communicated that to them, and they'll work themselves to the bone. I actually have done the opposite. I try to get in as much good quality work, because you can squeeze 4 hours of work into a 10-hour workday.
Yeah.
Right? Or you can work really hard for 6 to 7 hours. And I've always tried to do the second, where I'm putting in, but then I would take like a month off, not all at the same time, but like I'd get 2 weeks, and I would always end up taking those 2 weeks for whatever, and then another week unpaid or whatever. And everybody was always like, why do you take so much time off? And I'm like, because I work really hard when I'm here.
Yeah.
And like I add as much value as I possibly can, but also like, this isn't my life. Because I did that. Yeah. I did that for the first 3 years of my career, where my job was my life. I wasn't dating. I wasn't married. I wasn't doing anything other than just working. And I remember like just doing all-nighters, and it was terrible. It was really quite awful. It reminds me of actually Melinda Beck. Do you know Melinda Beck? Actually, I don't know how you'd describe her, because the title of her talk last year at Max was Designer, Illustrator, Animator, I Still Don't Know What I Am 25 Years Later. I think that was the title of her workshop. But she animates bumpers for Nickelodeon, Nick Jr. She animates like explainer videos for like CNB. No, not CNB. Anyway, some of the, I think Forbes, and some of those magazines that do some online content. And then she also does a ton of editorial, like for the New Yorker and for like Atlantic and stuff like that, where she's doing these editorial things. And she has a fascinating process where she'll take found materials and then scan them and then use that instead of illustrating. So a lot of her stuff is made out of like her bending coat hangers and wrapping yarn around it, and then
That's
like
awesome.
Doing levels adjustments. Her stuff is great. But her big thing was she's a single mom and is able to achieve this incredible success while staying very active in her daughter's lives.
Yeah.
And she said basically that, like, when I'm on, I am on, but when I am off, I'm not halfway off. I'm all the way off.
Yeah, there's there's so much to that. Like at my workplace, some of the people who are like my peers, like who are also in management, like they have like an app on their phone for work email, and I will not download that to my phone. When I am off work, I am off work, and my
Right.
team can message me, but like that's it. And I'm not promising a response because I'm literally off work, you know.
Yeah.
And I actually find that keeps me more sane and on point when I'm there because I'm fully present.
Right.
Whereas if it's just dogging me during my weekend or whatever, it's like a similar thing to the rationale of sending team members to conferences.
Right.
It's a smart idea to have people who are engaged and at like 100%, because you're going to get better work out of people who are fueled, inspired, and well rested than you're going to get out of people who just feel like they're squeezing every last drop out of themselves. So, like, that's something I've had to consciously work on, also to allow time in my life to stay engaged as a designer and have the personal space to like work on personal projects, which we advocate for. That's why we started this thing, right?
Right.
But it's like, when I was initially first year art director, I literally lived art direction. I was there till 2 in the morning multiple times, and part of that's just new manager stuff where it's like you're a type A personality if you end up there, and so you're the type of person who you're like, I'll do it all,
Right.
and that doesn't work. It's not sustainable. And so I learned to delegate, and I also learned very much to like keep a work-life balance. It's part of why I wear a tie to work. I literally want the perception when I'm at work that I am at work. I have my costume. This is what I do.
Right.
I'm off work. My costume's gone. I'm me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really healthy. So that was a really inspiring talk by Jessica Hish, and it was cool because she showed some technique and also showed a lot of stuff from her kids' book that's coming out, which is
Cool.
really beautiful. I think it's I'll Be Brave Tomorrow, and it's beautiful work. So I highly recommend, if you guys haven't checked out Jessica Hish. Like, she's half of the reason I think I even wanted to go to Adobe Max was just to have the opportunity to kind of see her speak and talk about her work and stuff. But it's also inspiring because like some of that hustle did get her where she is. So it's like there is a part when you're starting out where it's like you may not be able to have that pause between work and life because you're competing with people who like will not sleep until they get that door open. And so there's a give and take of it. Like, I think if you're entering in, it's like you almost have to have this like insane persistence and kind of craziness, because that seems to be across the board with a lot of the people who spoke too.
I think it's interesting because we don't. I was just at VidSummit, and during one of the lunch days, we were sitting there, and one of the girls there was like, "Hey, everybody, get out your phones." So we're like, "Okay, this is interesting," and she's like, "I'm just curious, like, pull up the app." And so there's this thing in iOS for iPhones that will tell you how much time you're using your phone for different categories. And like the entertainment category on a daily basis at that table was like an average of like 5 hours.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about, I mean, it's skewed, right? So for me, I will listen to a podcast or an audiobook while I'm at my drawing table, and that kind of counted towards it or whatever. But like people were going in, they're like, "Oh, I've watched, I've played this game this many times, but I never played this game for more than a couple minutes. It's just I seem to play that hundreds of times a day in between whatever." And so there's kind of this interesting thing, because I think the working really hard and being present. This is kind of an existential theory, but I think it's really applicable. Is that you should be very present in what it is that you're currently doing. Like, don't worry about the past, don't worry about the future, and you should be very engaged in the here and now. And part of I think what the problem is, and I'm actually going to do a big long video on what I'm about to say, so don't I won't dive into it too much, but I have noticed that unprogrammed time versus programmed time, unprogrammed time is almost completely disappearing. Programmed time is where somebody else is telling you how to feel and what to look and whatever, right? And so most low-paying jobs are programmed time. You take orders, you follow orders. Education almost all the way through college is program time. Some colleges are starting to, and some professors are starting to, and you get the occasional teacher in K through 12. But for the most part, you're telling a bunch of kids to sit down, shut up, and do exactly what you're told. It's program time. Watching television, watching movies, listening to music is program time. What you're doing is you're having somebody else entertain you, and you are a recipient of something rather than a creator of it. And there is almost no space in our life nowadays for boredom. And boredom is hugely important. It is so massively important because that gets you into the neurological state of the default mode network, which is where creativity and empathy and long-term memory and stuff comes from. And here's the thing. I'll wrap all this up because I'm actually going to do this in another video. But the thing is, I actually feel very, very strongly that you can hustle super hard and still, in the same time period, in the same day, relax and have relationships. You know, I don't think those things are mutually exclusive, and I feel like a lot of the culture that is built around this cult of busy, you know, is destroying people's lives because they have no boredom. They have almost no effective work because they're so burnt out that they're going through the motions. They can't come up with any creativity because they don't have any time to think about anything, and they're destroying all of their relationships with their kids and their spouses and their friends. And so
I totally agree.
That's only going to spiral out of control.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because, like, this was another huge moment. It's like Max was just full of huge moments. Like, and this is a personal moment, but I get a message from my wife because there's a parent kid conference at like my son's in pre-K, and my son's SPED. He's in a SPED program because he's autistic, and we have like literally read to him since he was born, and that's like non-negotiable time. Like every night I read with my son, and like it's weird because he's so good at reading that he reads to me. So like today I sat and we read a whole collection of like children's books, like one of the big fat compendium things. Right. And he kept insisting like, no, I'm reading this. And he read it. He reads beautifully. And so that's like, I was thinking like, anyhow, so I got this text from my wife and they're going to transition him to normal school. Like not SPED. Like he like, we were fortunate because he was high functioning, but it's like, that's huge, like unbelievably huge. But that required us to be really involved. We had to do like speech coaches, all sorts of like stuff that just like my wife has taken the lead on. And yet it requires commitment of like days and days and days of just investment in your kid. And I was thinking about like, if I were so into my work that I didn't take the time to like read to my son every day, then I wouldn't be getting this cool report from his teacher. I mean, he's brilliant and he probably would be brilliant regardless. But I have a suspicion I wouldn't be getting that report that he's reading at a 5th grade level and he's not even in kindergarten yet. That's like that's mostly him. But it's like, if you get the wrong mix there, you're leaving somebody behind. And I think that really, you know, and that could go for marital relationships or whatever. It's like, that always has to take priority, because if you drop that, you literally lose the whole purpose of like the success stuff anyway. I mean, the whole purpose of the success stuff should be hopefully to like make your life more fulfilling and those around you's lives more fulfilling, you know?
Yeah.
But anyhow, so that's a little rant on that, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. But that was a trip because it's like the most exciting news. Like that's what we've been hoping and like praying for like a year and like years, you know, since he was diagnosed. It's been like the dream, and it doesn't always work out that way for everyone. So the fact that I'm getting that, and then I'm like, oh, and I'm going to watch like Ron Howard speak now. Like it's just like my brain was in this weird cloud. But yeah, I feel like we got to just kind of carry this over. Like I really want to keep going a little bit, but I do think we'll have to carry this over to another art check if you don't mind, because I got so much out of this. It's nuts.
That'd be good. Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the things at VidSummit that I thought were interesting, but it's a little bit more technical stuff. So most of what I learned is kind of behind the scenes. But yeah, I think just conventions
that stuff too. I'm curious.
I don't know. I don't want to necessarily give away the secret sauce, but yeah, it's interesting. You'll see. I'll tell you this. Those people watching this, you will notice a drastic change in thumbnails. That was a major thing, and is kind of uncomfortable for me to act the way that I'm acting to get those thumbnails. It's authentic because I am goofy, but I'm usually not goofy publicly. So anyway, but you know, there's data to show that those just make for more clickable thumbnails. So there's a little VidSummit thing. But yeah, I'm gonna call it. And you'll also notice that because we are prepping to get ready for this going to podcast, that we now have sound effects.
Game over.
And so I'm gonna try. We'll see how well I do this live. I'm gonna try to have sound effects at each stage, and just so everybody knows, Josh can't hear those sound effects. I'm still trying to figure that out. So
I was just stating before we started recording, I was saying, like, I for all I know, right now when I'm talking, there's just like 5 fart noises going on behind my back. I have no idea. I'll only find out in the replay.
Yeah, you'll never know. I will tell you this though. Every time either of us makes a corny joke, this is going to happen.
I hope so.
What it was CSI Miami. Every time the guy with red hair says something and puts his sunglasses on, and you get the doors. Yes. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah. Awesome. So anyway, so we're gonna do our art check now, and we'll see if I can turn the timers on and get the things going. So would you mind if we started with challenges this time, because that will make my progress make a lot more sense.
Cool. Let's do it.
So I'm gonna start with challenges here. So challenge for me was I am exhausted, and I think part of it is lack of sleep. Part of it is this one of the 4 medications they have me on right now. If you take it without eating, then it's a bad time, and I accidentally did that before bed the other night. So then last night I went to take a nap at 8 o'clock, and then I woke up at 7 a.m. And so I slept for like 11 hours. So yeah.
That sounds that definitely sounds like a challenge, and man, and you got another month left on that? Oh.
So I just need to remember to eat when I take it, and I'm fine. But I just didn't get anything done yesterday because of it. Because I was intending to. I usually work from 9 to midnight, and so I was like, I'm just gonna take a nap for an hour or whatever, and then I slept for 11 hours because I haven't slept well for a few days.
I love it. Anyway. That's awesome.
So how about you?
My challenge was just I feel like on fire right now for just making stuff and completing my book, and there's a million things I want to do, and that's the big challenge with Adobe Max is there's this jumble and a lot of fire, and I want to point it in the right direction. So but yeah, I had no time because it's such a busy day. You get back, you hit the bed, and you're asleep, and that's it. I had no time to work on anything. So yeah, that was my challenge.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really interesting is that I heard that was really good along those lines is to minor changes. That was one of the keynote speakers at VidSummit was this is like drinking from a fire hose, right? And he's like, you're gonna hear 1,000 things that you want to change about your YouTube channel. You need to pick a couple major ones and make minor changes and little tiny tweaks, not burn everything to the ground and start from scratch, because that's not sustainable. I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
That's great, actually. Thank you for sharing that. That's cool.
Yeah. So get rid of that. So timer for progress. As far as progress goes, oh wait, I got to come back to progress. Sorry, I forgot to load my thing. Let me load it real quick. Why don't I'm gonna yellow us out, and why don't you go through progress? Because unless you don't want to show anything, hold on, I just gotta load my thing up. Do you want to show something for yours? Oh, good. I have
sure.
It. Okay, I've got it.
Yeah, I can. I can kind of go through progress a little bit.
Okay, go ahead.
While that loads up. So I, like I said, I didn't make a lot of progress on my comic. I did post to Tapas, my latest one, and I've had a few people subscribe to it, which is really encouraging because I'm getting closer to that number where I could actually make like 3 pennies off of it. So if you guys really want to support indie comics and the awesome stuff I'm doing, you want to do it, go to tapas.io, search for Quarterly Stories, add it to your library there. I wish they had a simpler system to subscribe, but just that's what it is. And I'm going to go a little over. This was my progress on comics, though, was I spent today like doing this experiment with my son where we drew these awesome comics that he literally dictated to me. So I'll just go through a little bit of one and then I'll call it a day because I don't want to be that guy who's like, my kid's great. But so he titled it as The Dinosaur is Trying to Get Us by Benjamin Kemble. He put a price of $29.30 for this story. And then, I basically just asked him, I was like, what do you want the title to be? Well, okay, what do you want me to draw? And he's like, well, draw me holding paper. And so I was like, well, what are you saying? And he said, I'm saying here is some paper data. And then I was like, well, okay, what else do you want me to draw? And he's like, well, you're going to get the paper, so draw you. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, well, what am I saying? And he's like, thank you for giving me a piece of paper. And I'm like, what do I draw next? And he's like, a dinosaur breathing fire. And I'm like, cool. And then I'm like, what's the dinosaur saying? And he's like, I am a dinosaur, rawr. So I'm like, okay, I'm letting him lead this,
Right.
And I'm like, so what happens then? And he goes, I say, stop, dinosaur. And I'm like, okay. And then what does he do? And he says, stop, Benjamin. And so he walked away on his, so then I was like, well, what happens with the dinosaur? And he's like, well, the dinosaur burns me. And I'm like, do you really want the dinosaur to burn you? And he's like, no. And I'm like, so what do you want the dinosaur to do? And he's like, he's going to walk away on his own to his own house. And and I'm like, and what does he say? And he's like, sorry. And I'm like, sorry? And he's like, no, sorry. So that's the story. And I was like, dude, I'm going to do this riffing and post these on Instagram, like whether people care or not, because I think it's brilliant. There was another one where he asked me to have a carton of milk talking to him. And I'm like, this is like gold. Like, I can't think of this random stuff. It's crazy. So I'm getting a kick out of that. But that was the comic progress and drawing progress I made today. Sorry to regale you with a tale awesome. of my kid's silliness. But
it actually reminds me of a really fast story that I won't go into, but maybe I'll show on here sometime. Axe Cop, Ethan Nicole, who draws Axe Cop, was like, hey, I'm getting married and I'm gonna take a month off, and so does anybody gonna do any guest spots on my webcomic? And I was like, sure, I'll do one. And so I interviewed Scarlett to have her write it at the time, and it was just as good. It was just like, it was so awesome. There's these two guys that had this fight, and I can't remember the name. She named them, and they were hilarious. And the way that they fought was they got sticks out, and their sticks yelled at each other, and whichever one yelled, it's like, so I'm drawing these sticks with faces going it was pretty funny. And then at the end, everybody got frozen yogurt. That's how they resolved that conflict. Was so good. Yeah, kids are great. Man. So for me, which button do I push here? I have not gotten very far on this, so you're looking at it right now. I've got Aang as Spider-Man. That was kind of the most recent one, and then oh shoot, where is it? Yeah, it's this one here. Anyway, Aang as Spider-Man, and then I've got some more. I finished off, though I don't have a picture of it right now. I finished off doing. Now I've got to look at my paper. Oh, Goku as Man-at-Arms. And unfortunately, I've only had about 15 minutes of inking. So there's the one I showed last time. But yeah, that's all I've really done. So I'll be doing a lot more after we're done here. I'm behind on where I want to be, so I've got a couple more characters I got to ink tonight. But the inking is going really fast, so.
So should we? That sounds like a good transition to plans. So let's get into plans.
Yeah. So as far as plans goes, I've got. I'm gonna do. Oh shoot! I forgot. Oh, I'm gonna do Dwight Schrute as Superman, and I'm gonna do Optimus Prime as Evangelion Unit 01. Before we meet again, at least those two and some background. So.
I love it. I love it. It's amazing. These are great. Like every time you mention the crossovers, I'm like, it's so good. It's so good. So I'll be just doing inks. That's pretty much not inks. Thumbnails. My brain's still scrambled from Adobe Max. That's going to be my excuse for brain farts for the next month. But yeah, so I'm going to do that. And in the same vein, like I'm really going to try to take this fuel and put it into finishing my comic, because if there was one through line of everyone who talked, and we'll get into this when we talk about more of it, it's the fact that you have to have a side hustle and you should be passionately pursuing it, because the people who spoke there all got there because of their side hustle. Yeah,
and I've been to 2 Maxes before, and so between the two of us, we're representing 3. Literally every person that's worth anything has gotten to where they are because of some sort of side hustle. It is almost universal. I mean, I went and talked to on another trip we toured Silicon Valley, and I went and spoke to people that work at Facebook and Google and LinkedIn and Symantec and all of these huge Silicon Valley tech companies that are like really impressive, right? Everybody there that I talked to, it was like, how did you get your job? And it's like, oh yeah, well I was working on this side project, and then so-and-so noticed it and thought it was cool. And like other professors that I know that have done this same type of trip, like there is a friend of mine that just went out to New York and hit up a bunch of like PR and journalism and advertising agencies. Same story. Like literally everybody that you talk to that is at the top of their game career-wise is there because they've done a side hustle. There's no way around it.
Yeah. So do a side hustle, do a 48-hour art check, and let us know too, like, have you guys been to conferences? Like, what was your experience doing like design conferences or conventions even? Do you like, what do you do with that fire? Like, because right now that's something that's on my mind. Like I'm filled with all this passion and reinvigoration of like love for art, and like original desires I had as a young artist are kind of popping out of the woodwork. And so I'm curious, like, where you guys place that? Like, if you get that inspiration, where you put it into, and how do you kind of isolate your 2 targets or whatever for it? So I want to hear. Let us know in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'm gonna have Goku call us out here. I actually just realized I think that's Krillin. But anyway, so if you want to go to my stuff, you can check me out at CoryKerr.com. I still haven't sent that email out that I was going to say, so there's still a chance to go to CoryKerr.com/email and get on my email newsletter and catch the most recent email that I'm going to send out. And then if you want to check out Josh's stuff, you can always go to quarterlystories.com. And he's got some new pages up that you may not have seen, so check it there and check out Tapas. And do whatever Tapas wants you to do to make Josh earn that 3 cents, because that's a hard-earned 3 cents. And then a special thanks to No Saboteurs, and you can check out their stuff, facebook.com/No Saboteurs. If you haven't subscribe to Josh's channel and my channel, and make sure to watch the other videos. If you haven't seen all of the art checks, they're all pretty interesting, and they're collected in these playlists. And so check those out. We really appreciate everybody that watches these. We've got some interesting videos coming up and some interesting videos that we've done recently. So go check those out, and we will see you guys, I don't know what day it is, on Friday. We'll see you guys on Friday.
Bye.